of sewbecurated, and on Instagram I'm sew.b. I wanted to talk to you today about how I do needle turn applique, and before I show you what I do, I just wanted to talk to you about some of the notions that will really change your game. So there's a couple of things that I recommend. A sandpaper board. It holds your fabric still when you're tracing onto fabric. So you put your fabric, wrong side of the fabric down with needle turn applique, and you mark your shape on the front of it. So, sorry, my screen just said I'm low of power. And how I trace, and just trying to think what was next, I got thrown. I trace with a grey lead pencil. I am not fussy or specific about what I use. That line is going to get turned under your work, and the only time I don't use a grey lead pencil is when I use a Clover white pen, white marker, and I use that, which looks like, now I won't have one in here. I'm not, oh yes, okay. Mine's a bit worn. A Clover white marking pen, and I use that when my fabric is really dark and I can't see the grey lead. But other than that, they're the two marking tools that I use. You use your templates or your template plastic or even cardboard to trace around onto the right side of your fabric. And then the other things that are going to change your game, the needle that you use. This is my go-to needle for anything that I do with hand. It is a Metler. It's not a Metler, that's my thread. It's a Bohin straw milliner's needle, size number 10. Now we stock these in our shop, but I'm sure you can get them wherever you get your notions from. Actually, I'm not sure. Not everybody has them, but I swear by them. They are the absolute bomb. They will bend. I like a bend in my needle. Just pulling one out here. Here's the camera there. Can you see that that's got a bend in it? And you can see my terrible nails. Sorry about that. You will bend your needle, and that's okay. It doesn't affect the outcome of your work. And then the other thing that I highly recommend is a good thread. So I use Metler silk finish cotton, number 60, but this color I use is Dew. Now the Dew spelled D-E-W. It is an off-white with a creamy base. The other one I sometimes use is Ivory, and Ivory is a darker kind of cream, kind of more with a brown tone in it. I use it for every single color. Your stitch is going to be hidden anyway if you're doing needle turn applique kind of carefully and correctly. So you don't need to worry about color matching your thread. You absolutely can if that's something that you want to do. I am more a minimalist in the threads that, or like the notions that I want to have on board or like have with me. Anyway, I'm gonna sit down in that chair that you can see back there, and you can see I'm going to grab one of the blocks from that quilt that needs needle turn applique on it. That's a new quilt that I'm working on. So I do needle turn applique in a couple of ways actually, in terms of onto the quilt. This quilt, I'm going to do it both ways. Sometimes I need to add it when the quilt is together because it's going across a bigger area and onto the borders even. And sometimes it's contained to a block, and I can do those while they're not attached or stitched into the quilt. But sometimes, like in the It's a Lot quilt, I always recommend that you don't do the needle turn applique till the end of your quilt top because it lets you balance color across your quilt top. So ask me questions about that if you have any, but there's always a reason. There's mostly a reason for what I'm doing, and I'm happy to share. Okay, I'm going to turn you around. Well, I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to show you how I needle turn applique. So I am using just template plastic circle here because this is a new quilt that I'm working on. I haven't got acrylic templates made for it yet. So if I'm ever trying to do applique and just designing shapes or whatever, I tend to use template plastic. I've got my grey lead pencil. I'm going to hold it down. It's on my, because I wasn't looking what I was doing, I just went under a little bit then. It's on my sandpaper board so that my fabric doesn't move. And I'm going to show you, if I turn that, excuse all the threads all over me. If I turn that to the back, can you see the fabric moving more as I trace? You get a less precise shape when you do it that way, which is why I recommend a sandpaper board. Anyway, I'm going to use something, I'm just going to turn that back over because I like to work on that surface, one that I've prepared before. Now on this block, I am appliquing a flower into the center of that, and I do that with the shapes, but lots of circle shapes. I need to find the center of my block. So I'm going to fold, and all I'm going to do is finger press. I mean, you can obviously do this with an iron and steam it if you want. Or you can rule into the center and mark that center spot with a pencil. But I tend to just do that and find the center spot there. And then the way that this is set up for me is that the line here that's drawn is going to hit the folded line here, and this line here is going to hit the folded line there. And then you're going to use, oh, I forgot to tell you about applique pins. They're really important. They're really good. They hold your work really, really well. And they're not too long, so they don't get in the way of what you're doing, which is very handy. So I have just pinned my circle now onto my base, and this line is lining up with the folded line here, and this line here is lining up with the folded line here. And I'm going to show you how I need to turn something like a circle, which lots of people have trouble with. I'm just going to thread my needle off camera and I'll be back in a sec. So I have my needle threaded now. I've done a quilter's knot. It's a single strand of thread. So my quilter's knot down here, I've shown that in a different YouTube. I am going to start the place that you might get the least nice result is where you're going to start and finish, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. So I'm going to start where it's going to be hidden, because I actually do, to make the shape that I'm doing here with needle turn applique, I'm going to do another circle over the top. And so technically you don't actually have to applique this area here. It will be hidden. I prefer to go all around my circle. So the first thing you're going to do is bring your needle up through your drawn line, and it's only through the fabric that is pinned to your base at this point. And then you take your needle, which is why it's called needle turn applique, and you tuck your fabric under and you hold it with your non-dominant thumb. Excuse my nails. You're just going to have to bear with them. So my thread is right here coming out, and I am going to go in immediately adjacent to that and then come back up. So I've gone all the way through to the back of the fabric, and I've come back up not very far away, just catching the very edge of the fabric. And all the travel that I did was on the back of the work, and then you just saw me tuck a little bit further around with my needle, and my thread is coming out here, and you go straight back in immediately adjacent. So this stitch here is very little. After that first stitch, or if you're not going into a point or a corner, you can do about half a centimetre, a quarter of an inch away from the last stitch. And each time that you come along, holding with use your needle, the point of your needle, turn it under, and then you come through, catch. Now, I've done a lot of needle turn applique. I love it. It's my favorite. So I tend to be able to move very quickly. When you're first starting, you are going to, I just somehow got a knot in my thread. Go. You're going to want to go slowly and turn carefully, but you're using your needle every time to tuck away, hold with your non-dominant thumb. All the stitch work is on top. The stitch is on top of your work. It's very small, it's very neat. It is immediately adjacent to where you've come up, catching the edge of your top fabric. You go down immediately next to it, but off the edge of that top fabric, and all the travel is on the back of your work. So you keep going around in the same way. Tucking, tucking, tucking. Now, I'm not sure if you can see there, but you can see just a tiny little bit of my grey lead pencil. So I know my circle's not quite right there. If you stroke on the back of your fabric with your needle, you will be able to get that to just kind of gently turn under a little bit more. The other thing I was going to mention is that lots of people, when they trace around their shape, you have to trim with a seam allowance, which I think I forgot to mention. You will see often in patterns they say use 1/8 of an inch as that seam allowance. I would say I'm using 1/4 of an inch, because if this little seam allowance here is too narrow, it's actually harder to tuck the fabric. So the only time that I actually work with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance is if my shape is so tiny that I can't get away with a quarter of an inch. And then I will work with 1/8 of an inch. I also will trim out the bulk from behind at a point sometimes, which you have in like a leaf shape. And when I get up to doing some leaves, I might do another video. This one is popular and not popular, but if it helps people, and show, I keep knotting my thread, which is unusual. If you get a knot like this, if you put your needle through your thread and tug, it will generally come out. And one of the reasons I don't use thread wax or anything, but I really like Metler thread is that it's strong but fine. And the notions that you use here really will matter. So a lot of people come into the shop and they'll say, or when I'm teaching them, oh, you know, I've been doing needle turn applique, why can you see my stitches? It's your notions, sometimes. Sometimes it's your technique. But if you use the correct notions, you'll get a better, or like good notions that work for you, you'll get a better result. And I use both this thread and this needle for anything I do by hand. So when I'm hand piecing, when I am EPPing, English paper piecing, when I'm putting my binding on a quilt, everything that I do, and can you see that I'm just going around working and turning with my needle. So the needle, the point of the needle helps you tuck that fabric under. And here, I'm gonna hold this up really close. See just a tiny bit of that line there. So I don't want to see that. So I'm gonna just stroke on the back of my fabric really gently with my needle and tuck it under. You see here, that's my finger pressed line. And you can see also that, oh, sorry, I've moved the camera then. Let me try and stop it. You can see that those pins, I didn't need to move them at all. They're tiny, they stay out of the way, they're good. I use Clover brand, but there's a lot of brands out there. I just like the Clovers. But, you know, you do you. So I'm coming back up to where this finishes. And this can be where it's a little bit hard to get a neat kind of shape. At the moment, you can see there's a big point there. And as I said, this is going to be hidden, which is why I start there, just in case it doesn't end up very nice. But what you want to do is tuck it under and then use your needle on the back of your work. Kind of like stroking a pet almost. And you can get that to be a really nice shape. Let go with my thumb to show you, but and hold it in place with that thumb of your non-dominant hand. I managed to unthread my needle just then, so just excuse me while I thread again. But you need a really blunt end on your thread to thread through the eyes of these needles, because they are fine, which is why you get that lovely fine result. And the thread that I'm using also helps me do that. So just using my needle there to tuck everything away. Come back through, and this is where I started. So at this point, I take it through to the back of the work. So you can see there that I've done quite a nice circle. It's in the right position. My pins didn't need to come out at all, so I'm removing those now, and I'm going to show you on the back of the work what it looks like. You can see your circle with your stitches because all of the travel happened on the back of the work. None of it happened on the front. And I'm sorry, I'm not in camera. So you can, like that stitch there isn't particularly fine, but you can basically not see any of it. And there's a couple of different ways to do circles. You can use perfect circles, which is a kind of template thing. I sometimes press around a cardboard shape and with foil, and I might show some of those ways to do a circle as well. But here's my first video in how to do needle turn applique. So, and then I'm going to do some more circles, and as I said, cover in that center. So that's the way it works. I hope this helps you with your needle turn applique. Don't be scared of it. It's just practice. And I'm going to show you a couple of little tricks, I think, or a couple of different ways that you can do circles if you want to. This is my preferred one. And the only way or reason that I use a different technique is because the circle is very tiny. But it's worth knowing what they are. So come back for another video. I keep forgetting to do outros, intros. I'm not really sure how to do all this stuff, but people keep saying they're liking my videos, so I'm going to keep trying. But I just wanted to say, come back, see what else I'm going to show you. It's not going to just all be tutorials or tips on how to do stuff. I'm kind of hoping to do a kind of vloggy thing about having a small business and a little quilt shop and being a quilt designer and dabbling in some other kind of stitchy things. And I guess partly why I want to do that, I'm just going to say a lot of things about nothing now, probably, but it's because I think we've devalued our work as women in this area for long enough, because women have mainly been the stitchers. I think we've said we're not artists, or we're not creatives, or, you know, we're only doing it for joy, or whatever the reason might be. All those things are really worthwhile. And like, if we're just doing it because we like doing it, that's okay. But we are artists and we are creatives. And Lucy said to me once, when there was a man in the shop and he was like, I don't make quilts like yours, I make art. And she said, you know, like when men say, oh, I'm a chef, but women are cooks. And that's a really gendered kind of statement, which I try and stay away from, partly because, you know, I've got a trans son. Like, gender I know is a social construct, and I know how much it can really hinder people in some ways. But I do think as women, we have devalued this work, and I would really like to value ourselves and the things that we're doing and the joy that we're bringing to ourselves and to other people. There's my outro. It's meant to be like 10 seconds. You got 2 minutes and 13 seconds. See you.